the worst thing psychology has done is to imply that people who have weight concerns or have metabolic issues, it's their own fault. And that all they need to do, why can't they just eat and move like everybody else? Well, they have a vulnerability, a susceptibility. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you wouldn't blame someone who developed cancer because clearly other people live the lifestyle that they live and don't get cancer. So it's clearly not entirely due to the person's behavior. But there are things that we can do to minimize our risk, to improve our health outcomes, and to prevent the onset of these chronic diseases. The problem with these chronic diseases...
This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. I explore the questions people think but don't ask out loud, either because they're taboo or thanks to cultural hypnosis. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. Hey Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. I am so glad you're here today. You'll be happy to know that although this episode is about nutrition, it's all good news, not blame news. My guest shares the CDC stat that literally no one is even talking about, side effects of a ketogenic diet, trial results, and how this research has changed his personal eating habits. Some do find it odd that nutritional approaches to cancer treatment are considered taboo, and some even find that offensive. But, that's what we do here. Not offend, not purposefully, of course, but we do explore the taboo topics people think but don't ask out loud. Why? Well, because our world isn't black and white. It's technicolored, full of nuance, and the goal here is to rehydrate the curiosity that's become shriveled up thanks to living in our algorithmic bubbles. If you are new here, have a look around. You'll find every episode is different and promises to entertain and educate. If you're a repeat listener, I appreciate you. And I'd love if you could appreciate me back by tapping those stars on the Apple Podcast app. You don't have to write a review. You can just leave a star rating, and that will tell future guests and sponsors that what we do here is pretty awesome and that they should be a part of it too. Now, you may not look at ratings before listening to a show, but guests do before they agree to be on it. So help me get even more kick-ass guests by giving those stars on Apple Podcasts a little tappity tap. And if you end up liking this episode, you'll also like the one I did with the food researcher about why food addiction isn't your fault. It's episode 76. All right, friends, enjoy the show. We all know someone who's been impacted by cancer. Yet, despite the improved screenings, fancy cancer centers, and pink ribbon walks, it remains the second leading cause of death in the U.S. My next guest is hoping to find sustainable solutions for both treatment and prevention. He's a professor and chair of the Dept of Health Behavior at the School of Public Health at the University of Alabama Birmingham, and the author of over 150 scientific articles. Today, he's going to share his insights from his over 30 years experience conducting obesity-related lifestyle modification trials. Now, if you suddenly feel confused, like, wait, I thought we were talking about cancer, not obesity. It's okay. This is going to be good news, not blame news, as we explore the question, can keto cure cancer? Scientist, researcher, professor, Dr. Kevin Fontaine. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
I definitely want to talk about what is a keto diet, because I thought I knew, and then it turns out I didn't know. And I'm so excited to talk about your research. But before we dive into that, can you share how you got into this line of research?
Sure. It's kind of a strange story. I got my PhD in England, and my wife is British, and we were going to stay there, but I got the opportunity to apply for a postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins, made a visit, and managed to fool them into thinking I was an expert in obesity. So they hired me as a postdoc, went on the faculty, and 30 years later, still working in this area. So I'd like to say it was a conscious, deliberate, goal-directed decision, but it was just the way things ended up working out.
Well, sometimes that makes for the best research because you're not already, knee deep in it with opinions and biases that you have to sift through. I am curious, from a statement of one of your papers, you quoted a 2017 CDC study that said that 40% of all cancers are related to overweight and obesity. And especially because that was a CDC quote, I was really surprised. Why have I never heard about any sort of connection between metabolic disease, aka obesity, and cancer?
I think you haven't heard much about it is because you had mentioned that one of the advantages of my starting the career the way I did is I didn't have preconceptions about the way things were or should be. And the National Institutes of Health and many people who study cancer believe it to be primarily a genetic disease. So this idea that what you eat and how physically active you are and your stress level, the idea that these could influence the development of cancer is generally still considered quite foreign. The idea is that you have a genetic disease. It's almost like you have a genetic time bomb in your body, and at some point it's going to go off, and there's very little you can do about it. Now that's been a long-standing perspective. It's changing quite radically for the good, but to answer your question, it's really hard to get people to change the way they look at things. And I've actually become convinced that the first line of treatment for any sort of disease or chronic condition should be dietary changes. It should be altering the macronutrient composition of your diet and seeing what effect that could have on your metabolism. Because most metabolic diseases, including cancer, are chronic diseases that are affected by lifestyle. The increase in obesity since the late 70s tracks very nicely with the incidence of things like type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's. Every chronic disease that we suffer from has its genesis, or at least is a significant contributor, is with what we eat and how we move, how often we move, how much we move, what we do to preserve our muscle. I think finally the government agencies are beginning to acknowledge the importance of lifestyle, the importance of what we eat. I'd like to say now that we recognize it, we're making massive changes in the way that we manufacture food and the way we process food, but unfortunately that's not happening.
No, it sure isn't. And I can see how some people might be offended of the idea that cancer is a metabolic disease, kind of like in the way that a lot of people who have type 2 diabetes are offended at the idea that it can be reversed, because it's like they feel that it's people saying to them, "Oh, you did this to yourself." And so I kind of see how people would be offended if it was, if cancer has that same message. How do you ever get that feedback? How do you handle it?
Well, I'm a very strong advocate, which is one of the reasons actually I became interested in diets that are not part of the recommended eating pattern that the government set forth for us. The standard American diet, the food pyramid, if you remember. It's not the fault of the individual. The individual simply lives in an environment where there's a proliferation of highly tasty, palatable foods that don't have a lot of nutritional content and are highly addictive. I never blame people for the state of their metabolic health. For many people, they're just eating the way other people eat, and they just happen to perhaps be more susceptible. So it's not entirely lifestyle. It's, you have genetic predispositions, which can be set off by the lifestyle. So really, in a sense, it is genetics, but it's not entirely. I always say the worst thing that my profession, which I was trained as a psychologist, the worst thing psychology has done is to imply that people who have weight concerns or have metabolic issues, it's their own fault. And that all they need to do, why can't they just eat and move like everybody else? Well, they have a vulnerability, a susceptibility. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you wouldn't blame someone who developed cancer because clearly other people live the lifestyle that they live and don't get cancer. So it's clearly not entirely due to the person's behavior. But there are things that we can do to minimize our risk, to improve our health outcomes, and to prevent the onset of these chronic diseases. The problem with these chronic diseases is they often take decades to manifest. So you actually seem to be all right. You might have put on a little bit of weight. You might not have as much energy, but the manifestation of the metabolic diseases that end up killing most of us are very slow and very insidious in how they develop. And that's why another reason why people are not as vigilant as perhaps they could be is because they feel fine.
Yeah.
But it's this slow poison from our diet composition that eventually takes its toll over us.
Yeah, you feel fine. You don't automatically like puke. You know, if every time we ate processed foods or something like that, or like seed oils, we threw up, that would fix the problem really quickly, but it is very deceptive. And I'm so glad that you brought up food addiction, because that up until a couple of years ago was completely a foreign thing to me. In fact, when I heard the words food addiction, I laughed because I'm like, yeah, I break out in a real bad case of death because I gotta eat. I need food to survive. But what you're talking about for, the uninitiated is those highly palatable foods that trigger those feel good chemicals in your brain and shut off the thing in your brain that says, yo, dude, you had enough. And that certainly must be an obstacle in any nutrition science, but definitely for you. I was reading your research papers and I saw that some of your participants dropped out due to, quote, quality of life concerns. And they were the brain cancer patients. And I was like, yo, dude, you got brain cancer. Like, put the fries down. What the fuck? It's not a big deal. But then on the other hand, I put myself in that person's shoes and I was like, ooh, you know what? When I'm in pain, and I also have had a bad day, I totally would want fries. I totally want chocolate. I totally want all those things I can't have. So it would be really challenging. Is there any support for your trial participants to come off of those addictive substances as you try to figure out if keto can make a difference?
We try to provide a lot of education, a lot of normalization, but you're right. There are powerful chemicals in the brain, and the food industry spends millions and millions of dollars developing foods for their addictive qualities, right? Because they want people to consume more of their product. I'm not saying the food companies are evil. They're trying to, make a profit for their shareholders, but they clearly manipulate the content of foods, the flavorings, in order to make them as addictive as possible. What we find in our studies, because what we advocate is basically a very, very low carbohydrate diet. We really advocate a very high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate diet. And most people who are in our studies have trouble adapting to that because they've been brought up to think that eating dietary fat is evil and will cause heart disease. And it's actually, we've got probably about 30 or 40 years of research that indicates that that's an oversimplification of the effects of dietary fat. So the adjustment most people have is eating a level of fat that they've been told for all of their lives will eventually kill them.
Interesting.
So I always tell people, tongue in cheek, I always tell people, if you want a healthy diet, kind of do the opposite of what the government and the food industry tells you to do.
Yes. I want to come back.
They have a vested. Okay.
Oh, yeah, they do have a vested interest. I totally agree. And I want to come back to that. So I'm going to mentally put a pin in that because I want to comment on the nutrition recommendations from the U.S. government. Do you ever feel as a researcher that this information won't become mainstream because our government is still literally recommending pretzels and low-fat potato chips as a part of a healthy diet? Like, that was literally something that they recently recommended. And it just makes me crazy. And I can't imagine how it must make you feel as someone who puts a lot of effort into these studies.
It's interesting that, first of all, the food guidelines, the dietary guidelines for Americans, doesn't come from the National Institutes of Health. It comes from the USDA. It comes from agriculture. So it's not surprising that they advocate dietary patterns that are agricultural focused, the healthy whole grain and all of these foods, popcorn, potato chips, snack foods, essentially, are largely agricultural in nature. So it doesn't really surprise me. And the people that every 5 years kind of review the guidelines and modify them, again, they are part of the establishment. A lot of the research done by academics on diet and physical activity and obesity is funded by industry. Again, there's a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, even though it seems very clear that our dietary patterns have produced, about a generation and a half now of people who are just metabolically unhealthy and experiencing amazing levels of chronic disease. The prevalence of, for example, type 2 diabetes since the late 70s has gone up about 800%. And it tracks with the dietary guidelines. The food pyramid came out in the mid to late 70s. So, it doesn't take a genius to see this line's going up for disease and this line's going up for the dietary patterns. The increase in the prevalence of obesity is amazing. About 80% now of adults are either overweight or obese in this country. And about a quarter of children are overweight or obese, and that keeps going up. I'm kind of simple-minded, but to me, that's a clue. That means something's different. Something's going on. And people say, oh, well, there's more air conditioning now. There are all kinds of alternative explanations. We're more sedentary now. Well, one of the reasons we're more sedentary is we're heavier. And, the last thing a heavy person, people who struggle with weight struggle with energy. So it always struck me that we still have this idea that the best way to lose weight is to eat less and move more, right? Because it's about energy balance. The problem is if you deprive yourself of calories, you deprive yourself of energy, so you're not going to be physically active. So they eat less, move more. You're asking people to do two very unnatural things. You're asking them to be hungry, and at the same time that they're hungry, you're asking them to burn more calories by being more active. It just is unsustainable and it doesn't work long term.
So help us understand what keto is, because I thought keto was kind of the same as the Atkins diet, which was really popular, at least in Nebraska, where I was at the time in the late 1990s. But it seems like it's different. So can you kind of tell people like maybe the percentages or like the grams, something that helps them wrap their head around like what it actually means for food consumption?
Yeah, it sounds like a simple question, but it's actually complicated because there are many different variations on these different diets. You have paleo, you have low carb, you have Atkins, you have keto, you have carnivore. But the basic premise or the basic prescription of a ketogenic diet is to try to reduce dietary carbohydrates to about 5 to 10% of your daily calories. So probably talking about, I think the Atkins prescription was less than 20 grams of carbohydrate, the traditional Atkins. So I would say less than 20 grams would get you into the keto spectrum. So to give you an idea what that means, it primarily limits your carbohydrates to green leafy vegetables.
Yeah.
Right? Because 2 slices of bread, depending on the maker of the bread, is probably your 20 grams.
Yeah, it's 24. As someone who counts carbs, 24. I can tell you it's 24 grams of carbs. Not net, it's just 24.
It's a very highly carbohydrate restricted diet, right? Which again runs entirely counter to what we've been told to eat. We've been told the original food pyramid was 6 to 12 servings of things like bread and pasta and rice and, highly refined carbohydrate foods. And those are the foods, unfortunately, which appear to promote what appears to be the real issue, which is insulin resistance. Whenever you consume carbohydrates, especially easily digestible starchy carbs, you get a big spike in your insulin. And insulin is a hormone. It's probably a hormone that's used for a variety of metabolic processes, but for our purposes, the issue with it is the hormone that is trying to regulate your blood sugar. And in trying to regulate your blood sugar, it removes glucose, blood sugar, from your bloodstream, and it has to put it somewhere. So where it ends up putting it is it ends up storing it into fat cells. So one of the reasons that starchy diets are so fattening is because it spikes insulin, and the body moves the insulin, moves the blood sugar primarily into your fat stores. It'll move it into your muscle initially, but your muscle can only hold so much. Moves a little bit into your liver as well. But once those stores are filled up, it goes to your fat stores. What happens is if you keep eating that way, you keep storing fat and you don't actually get access to your body fat to burn the energy off, to burn it as energy. Because all body fat is excess energy. So in a sense, people who struggle with their weight are so efficient at storing fat that it keeps piling on, but they have a lot of trouble getting access to the fat stores to burn it off. And the way that you get access to fat stores is eating this diet that's very low in carbohydrate.
Honestly, that's the best
So
description I've ever heard. That was super good. I feel like I'm like, oh, light bulb. I get it.
Well, it's like think of an ATM, right? You have cash in the ATM and you want to go to your ATM and you want to withdraw the cash, but you forget your code, your number. So you can't get access to it. So that's what happens with the body. The body has stored all this energy and you want to get access to it, but you don't have the code in order to release it. And the way you release it is you reduce your insulin. And one of the best ways to reduce your insulin, perhaps the only way at the population level, is to reduce your dietary carbohydrates. The counter argument that people have is I can't eat that way because I cannot do without my carbohydrates. And I will acknowledge the first few days on this kind of eating plan is a struggle. You do get cravings. You feel lousy. There's a thing called keto flu, which is your body is shifting metabolically and you just feel lousy. But if you get through about 4 or 5 days of that, and there are things you can do to mediate it, you can increase your sodium intake, magnesium, drink some more fluids. But once that switch clicks, your energy level actually goes up because you're getting access to your fat stores, which is where your energy comes from. And the other thing is you're not hungry. Keto stands for ketogenesis or ketogenic, and that is a dietary pattern where, again, when you're burning your fat stores, your appetite goes way down. You're just not hungry, and your energy level goes up. So it does some great metabolic things, but I think its primary value right now, the way society is, in helping people to better manage their weight and their metabolism.
Well, and potentially, as your studies have shown preliminarily, at least, like even cancers and tumors. So talk to me about what your studies have found. If you have any like specific examples of people that they've helped, or help our audience understand what the potential is that you've seen so far.
Sure. Well, I want to acknowledge there's a professor named Tom Zefried. I believe he's at Boston College. He's a cell biologist. He's really at the forefront of this approach, but basically goes back to Otto Warburg in the early part of the 20th century. He won a Nobel Prize in 1908. It's called the Warburg effect. But basically what he found out is that cancer cells thrive in a glucose-rich environment. So they need sugar to proliferate. They need sugar to spread. And this is called the Warburg effect. And what Dr. Zefried has shown is that if you can eat a dietary pattern that reduces your glucose, which again reduces your insulin, you can actually potentially, I don't want to say you can cure cancer, but you can certainly reduce tumor size. It's been shown primarily in animal studies, but it's beginning to be shown in in humans. And it is actually, Dr. Siegfried's had some great success with people who have glioblastomas, which are brain cancers. He has a very aggressive regimen that includes this very, very low carbohydrate diet. And, there are some cases of people that have been able to put the disease in remission.
Wow.
One of the problems, of course, is I don't want to oversell this. This is all preliminary, but the physiology is clear that in the studies that we did with ovarian cancer patients, we found that we could reduce their body. These are all obese women as well. We could reduce their body weight. We reduced their fat mass without reducing their muscle mass, which is a big problem with dieting. You tend to lose muscle as well as fat. But the very low carbohydrate / keto diet is what we call muscle sparing. It just selectively depletes your fat tissue because, again, when you keep insulin down, you're getting access to your fat stores. Insulin appears to play a role in cancer proliferation as well, which would explain why the high sugar, high carbohydrate diet does appear to be at least somewhat associated with developing cancers. Again, along with having a genetic predisposition. Again, it's all preliminary, but there does seem to be a physiological mechanism or basis by which this diet makes sense for at least ameliorating some of the disease. And I would, if I was to have cancer, I would go on that diet. I wouldn't expect it to cure my cancer, but I would expect it to help with the treatment, to be a significant part of the treatment regimen, which, as you probably know, is traditionally chemotherapy or radiation. You're trying to blast it out of the person's body. But I think as a complement, this can actually help them. There is some evidence that if you're on this diet, the traditional treatments may actually work better. And the other thing is you tend to have fewer toxic side effects if you're eating a low carbohydrate diet or even fasting when you're undergoing this treatment.
We're going to take a quick break to highlight the businesses that support the show and tell you about a podcast that could make you happier. When we come back, you'll hear about trial results on women with ovarian cancer, how you can be overweight but still hungry, and how this research changed Dr. Fontaine's personal eating habits. Hey friends, I want to share about another podcast that I'm a big fan of, The Happy Brain, hosted by Loretta Bruning of the Inner Mammal Institute. Happy brain chemicals include dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And her podcast is a fun way to see how these chemicals work in our daily lives and hear conversations with people who are exploring natural ways to spark them. Check out the Happy Brain podcast on your favorite podcast player. If you ever wonder where I find guests for the show, the answer is it varies a lot. And since it's something that gets asked a lot, I started including the backstory of each episode in my Monday emails. And then on Saturday, I share cliff notes and clickable links in case what you heard was so good you wish you could have taken notes. If you want to be included, text REAL to 66866 if you're in the US, or go to meredithforreal.com if you're elsewhere. Summer is in full swing, and so are the mosquitoes, and that can be a real buzzkill. See what I did there? I've been using Insect's mosquito service since 2019, and they continue to impress me. They guarantee their work, and pollinators are always top of mind. Don't wait till the last minute to get on their schedule, though. If you're in the Florida Panhandle or the Gulf Coast of Alabama, give Insect a call, ensec.net. If you watch the show on YouTube, then you see the beautiful backdrop of Trader John's, the exhibit where I record the show inside the Pensacola Museum of History. This is just one museum under the umbrella of the UWF Historic Trust. If you're planning a trip to Pensacola and need an indoor activity option, pick up a ticket. It's good for a whole week. Get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Now back to the show. Remember to stay till the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode. Has this changed the way that you personally eat in the spirit of prevention?
Yeah, I'm kind of crazy. I've been eating this way for about 20 years. Been pretty much consistently under 20 grams a day. So I eat basically meat, chicken, and avocado. And sometimes I'll have a few almonds. And butter. I eat a lot of butter. I eat a lot of fat, a lot of dietary fat, things that we're told not to eat. And I think I told you this. I actually, every time I go to the physician, which I don't go much anymore because I don't like what they do. But anyway, they want me to go on a statin, right, for my cholesterol. So I told the doctor, well, give me 6 weeks and see what I can do on my own. So she said, okay. Come back 6 weeks later. My cholesterol's down. It's around 50 points. It was never ridiculously high, but it was over 200, which is their default to put someone on statins. So she said to me, how did you do that? Well, I said, I got really strict with my diet. She said, oh, tell me. I said, I ate nothing but red meat for the entire 6 weeks. She was kind of taken aback. Didn't really want to see me again after. So it just runs counter to the standard of care.
It does. It does. But I think
she would have wanted me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the good news here is definitely since the pandemic, a lot of people are taking more personal responsibility for their own health. And, I think that's really incredible. So I know I'm seeking out information directly from the people who are doing this kind of research like you.
Well, I can tell you that, I think this country fared particularly bad with COVID because we had so many metabolically unhealthy people before COVID hit.
Yeah.
So a lot of the respiratory issues, obesity and metabolic disease are highly inflammatory. So you're already inflamed and then you get this virus and it provides an assault that the body just cannot handle. And, obesity and having metabolic disease, being type 2 diabetic were two of the highest risk factors for people dying from COVID in this country. And if you look at other countries where the population is much leaner, they did not have the death toll that we had. So it's an example of this metabolic disease is not only chronic, but if you get hit, if you get hit or assaulted with a particularly nasty bug, it can really, really do damage because you already have an immunocompromised system before the COVID hit. So public health authorities didn't really focus on that too much. They were really focused on getting people vaccinated. But I think more attention needs to be paid on getting people metabolically healthy. And that doesn't mean taking medications to treat symptoms. It means getting to the root issue, which is, again, this whole thing of insulin and insulin resistance.
Yeah. So for this research...
What do I know? What do I know, right?
Yeah. You're just a researcher. Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of people who are open to the idea that the approach, we need to do something different. And, when you realize that cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States, only second to heart disease, which kills over 500,000 Americans every single year, then, I think people are starting to be empowered. There's, of course, the people that will just always do whatever the mainstream message is. But I think it's really nice to hear directly from people who are seeing the results in a controlled study. So before we close out today, is there anything else about this research that you feel like you really want to share with everybody?
We can and have actually documented evidence that people can reverse their type 2 diabetes through this method. There's a company called Dept of Health, Virta, that does a virtual clinic on treating type 2 diabetes. So if anyone listening has type 2 diabetes or knows someone, they should take a look at their website. It's a combination of a ketogenic diet with kind of careful monitoring and social support. The other thing I think I wanted to mention is if you decide to go on this eating plan and stick with it for at least a couple weeks, you will notice an increase in your energy level and you will spontaneously become more physically active. It's interesting. A lot of what we do with our diets, we don't even tell people to be physically active or to try to get more active because we know that once they get access to the fat stores, they will automatically become more active and more energetic. So it's a byproduct of altering your metabolic functioning that promotes physical activity and exercise. I know people tend to think you have to do both simultaneously, but if you get your diet in order, you will automatically become more physically active because you won't be able to sit down anymore because you'll realize how sedentary you were and how lousy you felt. And then when you get access to your fat stores, it'll be like night and day. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from people.
Have any of the people that have been a part of your trials gone into complete remission from their cancers?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. And the question is whether this diet is better for prevention than it is for once you've got it, kind of treating it. I think once you've got it, you're always going to have to deal with it in some level. You can perhaps improve your chances by going on this diet, but I think its real benefit is probably in preventing the development to begin with. And that, again, that's a hard message to convey because it's usually years down the road. And people feel pretty good. And, the problem with being metabolically unhealthy is it's very slow and insidious. It's so gradual. You don't notice that you've become less functional and you don't feel good because it's so gradual. And usually by that time, you're already getting manifestations of metabolic diseases. The problem is that in this country, we treat the manifestations of these diseases as the disease, not the symptom of the disease. So we're really good at treating symptoms. We're not really good at getting to the root of this, which again, primarily appears to be at this stage of our understanding, insulin resistance. Body producing more and more insulin to move that glucose and those carbs out of your system. And your cells become insensitive, so it takes more and more insulin to do what you used to be able to do with less insulin. Your pancreas is wearing out in a sense. I think that is the mechanism that drives most of these chronic diseases.
And so for the patients that have been part of your research, I read that you had some tumors that shrunk. How are you measuring the impact on cancers that are not tumors?
Well, it's very difficult because one of the issues with our study is these were women with ovarian cancer who were also obese. And what we were doing, they were all at various stages of their treatment. So it's any effects that we found with the diet were confounded by the fact that they're on different treatment protocols and at different stages. So the ideal study would be to try to get these women right when they're diagnosed, before they're even treated, put them on the diet before they have their surgery, which is the primary sort of initial thing, is to remove the cancer. And the delay from diagnosis to actually getting surgery can be as long as 3 months. So we're thinking, let's put them on the diet for the 3 months before. Let's see if there's been any change in the tumor right when they're getting the surgery. Get the thing out as best as possible. Keep them on the diet and then have them do their conventional treatments as well. And just to see whether that would allow us to have kind of a beginning time course and kind of follow them over time. That study, as you can imagine, is extremely difficult to do, extremely expensive. So we rely on these suboptimal trial designs. Let me just close with this because I think it's important. When you see very, very heavy people, right, and they're eating, and you say, how can they eat? They are eating because they're hungry. And the reason they're hungry is because they don't get access to their fat stores, right? So they're constantly going up and down with their insulin. That's why we get this crash in the afternoon where people go to the vending machine to get a candy bar. It's because their insulin is dropped and they feel terrible and they've got to get it back up. Again, that's why it really parallels with addiction. But obese people eat because they're hungry. And the reason they're hungry is because they don't get access to their fat stores. So everything that they're eating at that moment is being used to fuel their functioning, even though they have all of that stored fat that could serve them very well. It's like they're hibernating in a sense, and they don't get access to the fat stores. So that really taught me more than anything that obese people are not responsible. They have a physiologic process going on that's making them hungry. And they have as much willpower as anybody else. but their physiology is not their diet pattern is not allowing their physiology to get access to their fat stores. And once you break that cycle, you get access to your fat stores, your life will change remarkably. And the other thing about the diet pattern you may have noticed is you can eat to satiety. You can eat until you're full, right? Whereas with other diets, we're told, well, you have to, you don't want to eat until you're entirely full because the excess will be stored. But if you eat primarily body fat, dietary fat with protein, you don't need to worry about how much you eat because it automatically regulates. Your body will know when to stop eating.
Yeah.
So you're allowing the wisdom of your body to come back because the culture and the environment has taken us away from an awareness of our body and using our body the way it was designed to be used.
I love that. Before we sign off, if there's some really wealthy listener out there who's like, gosh, I really want to fund Dr. Fontaine's research, how do they do that?
How can they do that? Well, they can email me. I don't know I guess you'll post my email. That would be great. People want to have a chat. I love talking about this stuff. I used to spend a lot of time doing sort of therapy with people, but I realized that it's just diet, right? We always try to develop explanations about why people struggle with their weight. Oh, I'm an emotional eater. Well, no, you're not an emotional eater. You're a physiological eater like everyone else, but your diet pattern is such that you're hungry and you're addicted and you have trouble stepping away. You need to be willing to have maybe 5 to 7 days of feeling lousy and getting through that. It's like trying to quit smoking, right? You're going to suffer for a few days, but once you break that pattern and you start eating the way that your body's designed for you to eat, it goes on automatic pilot and your life will change radically. I can guarantee that.
Well, thank you so much for having this talk. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Do you have an iPhone? If you do, I'd be so grateful if you left a rating. It's just as easy as tapping on a few stars. You don't have to write a review if you don't want to. Just increasing the number of ratings will tell future guests and sponsors that what we do here is pretty awesome, and they should be a part of it too. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one I did with the food researcher about why food addiction is not your fault. It's episode 76. Stay tuned next week when I talk with a woman raised by monkeys in the Colombian jungle.